What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Mikey McNuggets here, coming at you on a Saturday afternoon. Ohio State, Michigan tied at 10 apiece. It is halftime of the big game, so I wanted to take a few minutes out of my day to hop on here, and let's talk a little Cavs, because we all thought on UCSS yesterday the Cavs would bounce back and beat the Hawks in their game two of their home-and-home series, the second game being in the NBA Cup before the Boston game tomorrow night. But give the Hawks credit. They outplayed the Cavaliers again. They beat the Cavs again. They're now 3-0 in NBA Cup play. The Cavs essentially eliminated from their group in the NBA Cup. And there are some big picture takeaways, or really one big picture takeaway I think is pretty important for the Cavs as they continue to figure out who they are, what they do well, what their deficiencies are, and how they can improve and or fix those deficiencies before the playoffs. So we got a ton of comments yesterday, immediately after the game, saying the Cavs are frauds. They were never contenders. The whole 17-1, 15-0 start was a mirage. It's not real. This team isn't legit. Blow it all up. We all got fugazi'd. And that, my friends, is ludicrous. And I'll tell you why. The Cavs are not a perfect team, and they were never going to go 75-7 on the season. This team isn't in the same class as those historically dominant Warriors teams that won 73 games, or the 72-win Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Like, this Cavs team is good. They do a lot of things very well, but they weren't that good. They never were going to be that good. And anyone who thought this team was going to just copy and paste a 17-1 start 4 times throughout the season and win, 75 games was out of your damn mind. The more realistic goal was, can they break the team's franchise win record of 66, which is still on the table? They're 17-3. You multiply that over the course of an 82-game season, and they're on pace to lose about 10 games, 72-10, which is still an incredible season, would break the single-season franchise wins record. But they're not a perfect team. And a couple of things against Boston and twice against Atlanta stood out that I think the Cavs have to seriously address, or at least figure out better ways to match up against. And that is teams that present a particular matchup problem that was the exact same matchup problem that gave the Cavs fits last season. Kenny Atkinson has done a tremendous job. And I want to reemphasize, he has done a tremendous job, an incredible job of reigniting an offense here in Cleveland. Now, on the other end of the ball, their defense has slipped a little bit. They have not done a good job defending the three-point line. They rank second to last in the league in opposing three-point percentage against. Is that how you phrase it? Yeah, they're giving up. Opponents are making about 39% of their threes against the Cavs. That's second worst in basketball. You can phrase that however you want. And that's a major issue. And part of the reason that their defensive numbers have slipped a little bit is they're playing with more pace. They're emphasizing offense a little more than JB Bickerstaff did. That was always natural. But there's a big difference between where they were last year, which was about 5 to 7 in every important defensive metric, to where they are this year, which is between 16 and 19 in those same metrics. They shouldn't be falling off that much. And it's the same roster. The only change is the head coach. So a lot of the same things that gave the Cavs issues last year in terms of roster differentiation, we're going to continue giving them issues this year. And you saw it in full effect against the Atlanta Hawks. You look at the Boston game. Well, their first loss of the season. Now, Boston's the defending champs. They're the most talented team in basketball. They present this matchup problem to every other team in basketball. With or without Kristaps Porzingis, at any given time, they have 4 legitimate three-point shooters on the court and 4.5, depending on what you consider Al Horford and their backup big man 88, Kata, whatever his last name is, as a switchable character in their defense. And what they want you to do is essentially run the shot clock down. They're going to switch every ball screen up top. And then you're going to have to go one-on-one with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Derek White, or whoever's at center with about 5-6 seconds on the shot clock. And all those guys are plus defenders. They all have size. They all have length. And you're probably going to take a difficult shot late in the shot clock. That's their defensive strategy. The Cavs have really good guards. They have really good bigs. What they don't have are wings with size. And against Atlanta, who also is able to throw out a lineup with 4 or 5, depending on who's in and who's out of the game, 6'5" to 6'9", athletic, lanky, long, switchable defenders gave the Cavs issues again. It's the same issue they had last year. It's the same issue they still have this year. Why? Because the roster hasn't changed one bit. It's the exact same roster, just a new head coach. Kenny Atkinson can coach. He can't grow players. He can't make Sam Merrill 6'8" all of a sudden. He can't make Karis LeVert a 6'9" athletic switchy wing. Now, Karis LeVert is 6'5". Karis LeVert is athletic. He can switch defensively. Same with Max Strus. But those guys are giving up 4 or 5 inches to some of the better wings in basketball. And for example, Jalen Johnson on the Hawks was seeking out switches against the Cavs' smaller defenders. He's 6'10". He's an incredible talent. There's a reason that he was one of the 5 best high school prospects coming out of his class. Some things didn't work at Duke. He fell to the 20th pick. But that dude is uber talented. There's a reason he thrives in games against teams like Cleveland that don't really have a matchup for him if they switch a guard. Now, my issue with what the Cavs did against Atlanta and my issue with what the Cavs did against Boston were they just gave into the switching too early in the shot clock. If Atlanta decided to run some sort of high ball screen, they were bringing Darius Garland in particular, his man to the top. Darius's man was setting the screen for whoever was guarding Jalen Johnson or Dyson Daniels or DeAndre Hunter, who scored 20 off the bench. And the Cavs were just saying, okay, we're going to switch because that's what we're doing right now. And next thing you know, there's 12 seconds in the shot clock, and you have Darius Garland against a 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", maybe even a 6'10", athletic, dangerous wing player with 10 seconds on the shot clock. That is not a favorable position for the Cleveland defense to be in. It's not. And yes, sometimes there are merits to switching. And late in shot clock, fine, it's okay to switch. The Cavs' principle from a defensive standpoint is switching. Kenny Atkinson has talked about the fact that we want to switch because we want to kind of be defensively minded like Boston and like Atlanta can do. The issue is when they switch, a lot of times they're switching into disadvantageous positions as opposed to those other teams that are switching into advantageous defensive positions. There are a couple of things the Cavs can do. A, don't switch on some of them. If there's 13, 14 seconds in the shot clock, fight over, get around the screen, hedge. Do a little drop coverage. Let Darius slide under, depending on how good of a shooter the ball handler is. You don't have to just switch. That's what the defense wants you to do. Don't give it to them. Be a little more physical on defense. You saw Jalen Tyson get those 2 quick fouls in the home game against Atlanta. He got one again on the road where he was trying to be physical at the position of the screen, and he used a little too much, extended his arms a little too far. It's an easy call for the refs. They're going to call it every time, whether it's the right call or not. And that kind of threw him off, and then he wasn't able to kind of find his rhythm again. But I just don't like the Cavs giving up some of those switches so easily, especially when it's Darius or Sam Merrill or a guy who's not an at least plus to average to plus defender. Those guys can defend guys their own size, but when they're giving up 6-7 inches, it's just really tough. And I don't like switching that early in the shot clock. If there's 7 seconds on the shot clock, yes, switch. Make him go one-on-one. Make him take a jumper over you. You live. Good offense beats good defense. But with 14, 15 seconds on the shot clock, I don't like some of those switches. And then when the Cavs do switch with so much time on the shot clock, and let's say I'm not trying to pick on Darius. I'm just using him as an example here. Let's say Jalen Johnson beats Darius off the drive. Well, now you have, because you switch other screens, you don't necessarily have Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley in help position to deter the shot at the rim. You have either Donovan or Okoro or LeVert or whoever's in those positions closer to the rim, which doesn't provide the same amount of protection. And then you're slow in rotations because not everyone knows exactly who everyone has. And it's just one extra half second that can lead from a contested look to a wide open look. And that's part of the reason why Cavs opponents have shot so well from 3 against them. They're just beating them in scramble and beating them in rotation. And in today's day and age of the NBA, when you're getting wide open looks like that, a lot of these teams and a lot of these players are going to knock them down at an incredibly high rate. Flip it to the other side of the ball when the Cavs are on offense and teams switch against them, it's leaving them in a bit of a pickle. And part of the reason the Cavs offense, which has been frankly incredible to start the season, before Friday's game, they had the best offensive rating in the history of the NBA. Now, granted, the Celtics last year set that record. And this year, 3 or 4, depending on what time you looked at it, 3 of the 4 top teams in the NBA this season have 10 of the best offensive ratings ever. It's just kind of how basketball is being played. But the Cavs had the best of the best. And part of the reason they've been so efficient and effective is when teams had switched, they're able to drive by guys, drive and kick, and exactly what teams are doing to the Cavs on defense, the Cavs were also doing to their opponent, and the Cavs were shooting better than any team in basketball. Kenny Atkinson had said time after time after time. I have said time after time after time. Jason's tried to tell you guys time after time after time. The Cavs can't miss. And as good as they are as shooters individually, from a team perspective, there was just no way they could shoot 45% for the entire season as a team. They're a very good shooting team, but they're not the greatest shooting team in the history of the NBA. Go back to those Steph, Clay, KD Warriors. Like, those teams didn't shoot 43, 44% from three for an entire season. Sure, you can do it on any given night, but not over the course of an 82-game season. And over the last 2 games, the Cavs have missed some shots they made for the first 17, 18 games. It happens. It's basketball. The Cavs are going to have a down offensive stretch. They're going to have a down defensive stretch. But when teams are switching, back to the initial point, and this goes back to the whole roster composition, and we'll close on that in a sec. When teams are switching, now you have Darius and Donovan attacking 6'6", 6'7", lanky, long, athletic defenders. And what that does is, while they can certainly beat them, and they can certainly create enough space, not only for themselves and for others, it makes that extra pass that much more difficult. It makes getting off that floater in the paint that much more difficult, because instead of shooting over a 6'4" guy, you're shooting over a 6'7", 6'8" guy, and that changes the trajectory of your shot ever so much. When you do a step back, let's say Donovan does a step back, which is one of the most efficient moves in all of basketball. Now Donovan's shooting over the outstretched arms of someone with a 7-foot wingspan as opposed to a 6'7" wingspan. Less space. When they try to make that kick out pass, you take an extra half dribble to get around when a guy's 6 inches taller than the initial defender. So now instead of making that initial bullet pass to try Jerome in the corner, who has enough time to catch it, set, and shoot, now Donovan's taking a little extra half dribble to create the angle to get the ball to Jerome. And that extra half dribble gives the defender an extra half step to get out there. And it goes from a wide open 3 to just an open 3, or an open 3 to a contested 3. And let's say he does kick it to Ty Jerome, and instead of being open, it's contested. Now Jerome catches and makes one more pass. Well, now he has to make sure that secondary pass to go from a good look to a great look isn't getting deflected by the outstretched arms of a, once again, long, lanky defender. And if it is, where's his closeout coming from? These are the little roster construction makeups that the Cavs still have to figure out, and still have to figure out how to play efficient offensive basketball against. The beauty is there's like 4, 5, 6 teams, if we're being honest, that present that matchup challenge for the Cavaliers. Boston, certainly one of them. Atlanta, well, they've proven, certainly one of them. Oklahoma City, another. There's a few more across the league that have the size to do it. Portland, ironically, is not a very good team, but Portland has a ton of size and length on the perimeter. Minnesota, with certain lineups, does. But for the Houston, maybe the second best example behind Boston of it. But that's about it. Maybe Orlando with the right lineup, but for the most part, it's not an issue the Cavs are going to run into on a night-to-night basis. It becomes a bigger issue, though, if the Cavs have the 2 seed and Atlanta is the 7 seed. Or if they have to face a team like Orlando, or when they face Boston, hopefully in the Eastern Conference Finals. How are the Cavs going to attack the size disadvantages they have on the perimeter? And can they find a way to still be as efficient offensively when the switches they're switching into aren't similar sized, or not a big switching to a small? It is a wing switching to a wing, and you don't really gain an advantage when the defense switches. We're going to find out, because now there is a blueprint on how to kind of throw the Cavs out of their offensive rhythm. Now, it is worth noting, and this is very, 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 very important to note, that if the Cavs had shot as well against Atlanta as they had in the first 18 games of the season, they're 19-1. Right? Like, it's a make or miss league. And despite the issues that Atlanta presents to Cleveland, if they make 4 or 5 more open threes and get them up to the percentage they had shot over the first month of the season, then they win both of those games. So it's not like they're far off. It's not like Atlanta found, if you do this, the Cavs are screwed. It just presents a challenge. And it's something Koby Atlman is certainly aware of. And having Dean Wade healthy would certainly help. And one thing on Dean Wade, I like Dean Wade. Dean Wade could play. Dean Wade could play for my team any day of the week. But A, he's always hurt. And B, if you're a true championship contender, missing Dean Wade should not cripple you. You know what I mean? Like, missing a player of Dean Wade's caliber, your 8th or 9th guy, should not cripple you. But because of the Cavs roster construction right now, George Niang is the only healthy big they feel comfortable playing. Tristan Thompson can't play against Atlanta. just too athletic, too fast of a team for him. And they don't trust JT Thor at this point. Should JT Thor get some minutes? I wouldn't mind throwing him in there for a second to see what he can do, but clearly the Cavs don't feel confident and don't trust him enough at this point to get those NBA reps in games that are pretty meaningful at the moment. So, yeah, Koby Atlman has his work cut out for him. The Cavs don't have a ton of assets to trade. I kept seeing people tweet Cam Johnson yesterday as the perfect fix. And yes, on paper, he's the perfect fit alongside the Cavaliers, but the Nets want 2 first-round picks and a player for Cam Johnson. The Cavs literally cannot trade 2 first-round picks. They can trade 1, and that's in 2031. That's the next first-round pick the Cavs can trade. The rest of them, until then, are owed to Utah as part of the Donovan Mitchell deal. So I don't know how they're going to entice Brooklyn to send them Cam Johnson. Jeremy Grant's a name that's been kind of floated out there a little bit. I don't think he's a good enough fit to essentially lock yourself into that money long-term. I like Herb Jones of New Orleans if they decide to blow it up, but I do think the Cavs need a legitimate 3-and-D wing with some size who would not just help them on the offensive end, but on the defensive end as the season kind of progresses. And one last thing on switching, especially with Boston, we saw it in the third quarter in that first game, and I'm very, very, very curious to see if they can do it again tomorrow against the Celtics with Porzingis in the lineup. If teams are going to switch, you have to be able to get the ball to Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen down low and let them take advantage of the switch. Just like Jalen Johnson has the 4 or 5-inch advantage on Darius Garland, Mobley and Allen should have a 3, 4, 5-inch advantage on Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown. Tatum's big, so it's not as much Tatum, but those 3, if those guys switch, you have to feel comfortable throwing the ball into the paint and letting those guys dominate down low and make Boston second guess, is the switch worth it? We saw it in the third quarter in the first matchup against Boston, and that's when Evan Mobley went off. We didn't see it so much in the fourth quarter, and that's when the Cavs kind of lost their grasp on what was going on in the game. So that's something I'm going to keep an eye on for tomorrow when they take on the Celtics again in the rematch. It becomes a lot more difficult with Porzingis. He's 7'3" and a really good rim protector. He's just coming off that injury from last postseason, so it's still to be determined exactly how healthy he is, but that's something to watch. But big picture, I'm going to get to some comments real quick, and then we'll wrap up because the game is about to come back on. The Cavs are fine. Do not worry. They were never as good as 17-1, and they're certainly not as bad as 2-3 in their last 5. They're fine. It's a long season. They're going to have some shooting slumps. If the Cavs shot well against Atlanta, they go 2-0 against the Hawks. They picked a bad time to play some bad offensive games, and they played into what Atlanta does well. Now, I'm not panicking at all, but I do think some of the trends you noticed against Boston and Atlanta can prevail throughout the course of the season if the Cavs don't make some minor roster tweaks to better position themselves for a playoff series against a team that can present those same challenges. So it's not time to panic. The Cavs are still 17-3. It is a really good basketball team. Their offensive style translates to the playoffs. Defensively, they have slipped to a level that is unacceptable, but they have enough really good defenders on this roster, mainly the 2 big guys down low, that I'm pretty confident they'll figure out. They're not going to be a top 5 defense, but they can certainly be in that 12 to 14 range in the upper half of the NBA, as opposed to the bottom third, which is where they've fallen to over the last couple of weeks. Real quick, we'll get to some comments here, and then we will wrap it up because it's time to watch some Ohio State, Michigan. Blake says, yesterday's game was like a punch in the gut, but hey, we're still the 1 seed. John Bontea says, Dean Wade is the constant missing piece. Chris says, you're doing this during the OSU game. Come on, Mikey. Hey, I did it during halftime. We're going to get off in 1 second. Don't worry. Rob says the Cavs still need 1 or 2 6'8", 6'9" wings that can shoot and defend. Yeah, that's kind of my point, except those guys are like gold. It is tough to find them and even tougher to trade for them. Nikki says the Cavs are too small. They have trouble with long and fast teams, need more bulk. Cleveland Cavaliers says the Cavs are going to bounce back. Soul Train says, I think getting more wings is needed against Boston and Atlanta, but I still want Strus to have the Karras role. Yeah, Strus coming back is certainly going to help. He is absolutely their best role player. And in this Kenny Atkinson offense, I think he could do a lot of really good things. And getting him back will help on both ends of the court, but it doesn't solve the dilemma of not having some legitimate size on the perimeter to match up with some of the other guys on the Celtics, the Magic, the Hawks, for example. Couple more. John Bontia says JT Thorne, Jalen Tyson should play more against the Hawks, don't you think? I like what Tyson did. He got in foul trouble in the first game yesterday, played a little bit, not as impactful. They don't trust JT Thorne yet. If they see him in practice every day and aren't ready to trust him in the game, I tend to believe them that he's just not ready. Latte Larry says trade for DeAndre Hunter. He'd be a nice fit. But Prokhorov Simon says trade for Patrick Williams. Patrick Williams makes $90 million. I would not touch Patrick Williams. Theoretically speaking, on paper, he's a good fit. Money-wise, I don't think it makes any sense. Cleveland Cavaliers says we need Wade back. Yeah, George Niang is the only backup big right now. The only backup big on the roster, and until Wade comes back. And by the way, Wade, I believe, will play tomorrow against Boston. I was told he is days away from being ready on Thursday. They were going to hold him out on Friday. I believe he'll be ready against Boston. So yeah, that is where we're at. And last one from Drama City TV Clee. They were blowing us out. Cavs got to be embarrassed. Play with more focus and determination. Hey, if you can't play focused and determined against the defending champs on your home court in a revenge matchup, then I got nothing for you. Okay, Ohio State has the ball to start the second half. We've gone for 20 minutes. I appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll see you on the Monday edition of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. We'll preview the Cavs. We'll preview the Browns-Broncos game, recap the Cavs-Celtics, and Ohio State-Michigan. See you later. Peace.